Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Brain Fog Central. Thank you for watching. I hope you've had a really good week. I haven't done a lot on this before, but I thought I'd just talk about what might be going on for some of us during lockdowns. Now, I don't know where you are in the world, but certainly in the UK, the last lockdown has been an extremely long one. I think when the first one happened last year, a lot of people were very much rushing around trying to organise businesses, families, logistics, pretty much in crisis problem solving mode, you know. So even though it was stressful, I think there was a lot of attention and energy on that kind of crisis management mode, if I can call it that. And I think what's happened is over the year we've become used to this new normal, not normal. And I think Christmas was probably in the UK the straw that broke the camel's back, where with less than 1 day's notice, it was almost like Christmas was cancelled and we went into a lockdown. We'd had pretty much a quite significant chunk of lockdown, pure lockdown, not diluted lockdown. And there was a mini reprieve at Christmas, and then that got cancelled, and I think that for people was like really taxing and trying. So and I know in different parts of the world it's very different. In the UK we are now starting to emerge from lockdown, so we can have like 6 people outside. We can then start to mix with people indoors, although I'm personally not sure how I feel about that at the moment. The weather's lovely here, so I'm quite happy to carry on outside. So gradually we're supposed to be emerging from lockdown, but let's just see, because obviously they need to see what the numbers are doing, what's going on with the vaccination programme, and obviously there's different things happening with travel, so that might have an impact. So it's a bit watch this space still. So I think what prompted me to do this video was that I was watching Paul McKenna. I don't know if you know Paul McKenna. He's like a hypnotherapist, what would I call him, a self-help writer, speaker. And I used to listen to him on my local radio station, Chiltern FM, when he was a radio DJ, and he was really funny, like so full of beans, really nice, lovely guy, one of the best DJs I've ever heard. He was hilarious, great sense of humour. And then obviously he went through a career shift and went into this world, and him and his family had been unwell with COVID, and he was on a chat show, and the ladies were asking him, they were asking him, oh, you know, what about positive thinking? You know, we know that you're really into positive thinking. And he said, let me stop you there. He said, oh, it's not about positive thinking. We know we can't always think positive all the time. Sometimes things in life happen, and if you haven't been affected by what has happened with the lockdowns wherever you are in the world, then I'd question whether that's normal. So that really prompted me to do this video. Hello there, thanks for joining. It really prompted me to do this video when I heard Paul McKenna saying, you know what, if you haven't been affected by this year and what's been going on, then that's probably not normal. You know, it's not normal to, although, yeah, I'm a coach, I like to empower people, help them move forward, but very often we do that by facing our most difficult challenges and our most challenging thoughts. That really is the growth spurt. It's very easy to be positive when everything's going well in life, okay? I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Ride the ride, ride the highs, get through the lows, take the information and move on that you need to. But I really liked what he was saying in terms of, well, hang on a minute, you know, and this is someone that's a self-help guru, self-help expert, saying, well, I've been challenged by it, you know. And there's people like Tony Robbins, all these global coaches that have all their own coaches as well. And, you know, I think everybody has gone through, you know, we've all been under the same umbrella of the pandemic, of lockdowns. I wish they'd chosen another word for lockdown. I don't know what I would, I've been trying to think about it, because it's hardly, I know it does what it says, what it means, but it's like, oh, that word. Anyway, so we've all, there's about a million different experiences that people have had at different times through the lockdown, be that with schooling, be that with elderly relatives, be that with changes at work, be that with, you know, perhaps half your team's been furloughed and you're carrying all the work for the business, whether it's relationship issues, whether it's just plain boredom, lack of motivation, lack, you know, and this brain fog. So I wanted to talk about it today because I know some of us in the UK are starting slowly to come out of lockdown, and we'll just see what happens with that. that still brings about its own challenges, its own questions about how do I feel about coming out of lockdown? How do I feel about socialising? What about if my friends don't feel the same? Perhaps you feel anxious, or perhaps you feel like, actually, I've got some really clear boundaries about what I will do and won't do. You know, perhaps your family feels differently. So all of these, it's just change, 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 change. Life is full of change anyway. And I've done videos before about what you can control and what you can master and what you can influence during lockdown, and some of the things you can't, but there's a lot that you can influence and do. But I don't want to take away from the fact, I'd even say it myself, this last lockdown has been something where I've had to really push myself on and keep myself motivated. And I'm not going to lie, I've had times where I felt really incredibly sort of bereft in a way, very, very upset by it, and I've just had to let it out. I've had to go into that space and just release everything, because sometimes when we shed tears and cry, those are hormones that need to be expressed. Those hormones need to come out of our body. Tears contain stress hormones, so it's really natural to feel like that. And even if we feel like we're coping on the surface, so you may feel like, hey, I'm fine, and I still feel that a lot of people, I don't want to get political, that won't accept the pandemic or the virus, that won't change or think about themselves or other people and what they're doing and how they're interacting. To me, that's a sign of they're not accepting the change that's going on in the world. Like, want to stick to what was the normal. But let's face it, there's never been such a thing as normal, because one person's normal is not another person's normal. So we're sort of clinging to that a bit. But I do understand that, particularly in the UK, whilst we can do certain things, we can't do a lot of the things that we used to, or think in maybe ways that we would wish to. So it's the new normal, not normal, I think would be a good phrase for it. So we've had to use different coping mechanisms, and even if we're coping on the surface, we know below that things have changed, that the world, although the world is an uncertain place, the world is less certain than it was before for all of us globally, through a different range of experiences with the pandemic. And it is a very draining mix of emotions. I mean, a lot of the people that I've been coaching, and some of my friends as well, have said listlessness, lack of motivation, forgetfulness, memory lapses, feeling bored, feeling demotivated. So those are some common experiences, and I don't want this to be all gloom and doom. I'm just going to talk about and share what some of the science and what's been said about what's going on with our brains during this time. I can't cover everything because there's so much stuff to cover. But our brains are like plasticine, and what we can do with plasticine, what we can do with modelling clay, is we can reshape it. So we can definitely help to influence the way we think about things and the way that we see the world. And I've covered many of those on some earlier videos. So I'll just give you a quick rundown. Sleep, having a routine, exercise, having a purpose, having some goals, eating properly, drinking water, hanging around happy people, did I say exercise? Being around nature, counting your blessings, counting your gratitude, putting things in perspective. So earlier on in the year, I've done a lot of videos that cover those baseline tips that I always tend to recommend. But some of the people that I've spoken to have said, oh God, I've just been really forgetful, what's going on? And there is definitely a brain fog. And, I don't know if you've seen it in the news that some of the elderly people in care homes are becoming much more forgetful than they would be usually because of the lack of social interaction. But it's not even contained to the people that are the elderly population in care homes, because with isolation, the lack of social contact does have an impact on our brain negatively. And we do forget things. We do have that brain fog. It's not for that only reason, not only for that reason. It is about the lack of social interaction, but the fact that for some of us, unless your job has gone on as it normally would do, many days are the same. Many days might be similar. So sometimes that creates a certain brain fog, because you haven't got different experiences or stories that you have to recollect. Remember that you're telling to people, because you haven't got the social interaction, therefore you haven't got the variety of experiences. we haven't got the variety of geographical experiences because we haven't been travelling. So the ability to kind of use our brain to plan where you're going to go, to recount the stories of what you've done, to tell your wife or your partner about the meeting that you had, to prepare for that event that you want to go to. All of those parts of our brain are not being used. And what's happened over the year is that that's all kind of gone to the longer term. It's in there somewhere, but subconsciously we've buried it because we know things are different. Well, the bit of our brain that we are using is the one that's really helping us to process social distancing, cleanliness, processing the guidelines. And I don't know about you, but in the UK the guidelines they've changed quite a lot, so it's always a new change that you've got to wrap your head around. And when your brain is dealing with change, that is front of mind. It's literally at the front of your mind. That's the thing that your brain is working really, really hard to process and adapt to. And every time there's a change in our life, big or small, for example, I don't know, a new team member joins at work, that means the team has to have a bit of a shuffle, and there might be a bit of tension going on for a while until the team settles down. You break up with someone, that's a change. You change your job, that's a change. You get a promotion, that's a change. So there's all these, those are some of the bigger changes perhaps, but we've had these micro and bigger changes going on for over a year now. And human beings typically do not like change. Many of us do not like change. I quite like change. I think I've had quite enough of it this year, thank you. But in a way, there's been change going on in our lives, but not change that we're in control of. It's been done to us, if you can say it that way, done to us via the virus that's appeared, you know. So as human beings, when we're encountering change, we go through a whole washing machine of emotions: fear, grief, denial, acceptance, I don't know, worry, anger. And what happens is, until we've worked out and our brain has adjusted to that change, we keep going through those emotions. So for example, if you've broken up with someone and it was the best thing, for example, it was the best thing to do really, but you're upset about it, it's a bit like you'll go through that denial, acceptance, grief. You might go through that for a few months whilst you process the grief of losing that relationship. So you might cycle through that. So that is what happens in change. We cycle through these different emotions. And if you think about it, we've been having change and adjustments we've needed to make, like wearing masks, cleaning my hands, going out, thinking about who I can socialise with, who I can socialise with, you know. So we're just having to compute all these changes at the same time. And that, coupled with social isolation and maybe a lack of variety of experiences, does give us some issues with brain fog, because as I said, we're not repeating stories about what's happened in our day. I'm not saying this is the case for everyone, but just for those of you that have felt that. Maybe we're not at work and we haven't had those experiences at work where we've had conversations, we've had events, we've had parties. We're not repeating stories too much about what went on at the weekend, what we did at work. We haven't got that many more stories to tell because many of the days have felt the same. So these stories that we tell about, hey, well, what happened during your day? Oh, I did this, I did that, I went for a drive here, I did this. They're like episodic memories. And if we're not socialising as much, we don't have those episodic memories. So when we talk to people, we almost have fewer stories to tell. So dating during this time is a right laugh, isn't it? You know, in terms of, you know, trying to strike up conversations with somebody that you don't really know and you don't have a history with, if you're doing online dating, it's quite a challenge really, because it's like, right, well, we're going to have to find some experiences, as any relationship should be doing. We need to find some experiences we can share together pretty damn quickly, because we're maybe our days are quite the same with work and we haven't found out enough about each other yet, or had enough of those episodic memories or events to really bring ourselves closer together, you know. So that's why some of these memories don't feel as crystal clear, or, you know, maybe we feel like we haven't got a lot to say sometimes. We're not at weddings, we're not at family parties, we're not at any sort of parties, we're not at gigs. So the ability for us to recall and use that part of our brain and describe our story. Now, if you can imagine, Fred might describe a festival very differently to Sue. Fred might describe the sights and the sounds. Sue might describe it in a completely different way. So our brains all work very differently, and we're not really exercising that muscles. Now, we have been doing online socialising, but that is still quite one-dimensional, and actually staring at the camera, looking at the camera, being aware that you're on the camera, it takes a hell of a lot of brain power. It can be very draining. So, because it's almost like performing performing to a certain extent, if you want to sort of show up to a meeting and show up well. So that can be very, very draining as well. So we have to allow time for the fact that we might be feeling a bit drained. Many of the people that I've spoken to have some level of background anxiety, and whilst we can put things in perspective, that's a great technique, putting things in perspective, counting your blessings, counting your strengths every single day, and appreciate how lucky you may be and that others have it worse. There is still that underlying sense that the world is a very different place, and actually, right, what's it going to quite look like in the future? Do we know the things that we took for granted and would just do, that create these memories, create these connections, just aren't there? And so it's not surprising that the average levels of anxiety and even depression have kind of remained quite high during this time. And, you know, it does have an impact on memory. If we're worried, so for example, if we have got a bit of anxiety, you know, or we feel a bit anxious rather, or maybe we're feeling suppressed or low, then those worries and any other worries we might have really tax our brain. So our brain is dealing with those things, again, that are front of mind, the things that are worrying us, the things that are causing us some concern. Therefore, that means, like a computer drive, it hasn't got that much space to remember the shopping lists or remember what we need to do for work. So there is actual, you know, this is actually real. It's not a case of pull yourself together and you'll feel better in the morning. It's a case of accepting, not being sitting there feeling worried, isolated, alone forever, but just to kind of go, okay, this is kind of normal in these situations. My brain is just trying to cope with everything and not worrying too much about it. And, you know, when I talked before about geographical memories, we may not all of us, but many of us won't be going out and about so much. Again, in the UK, it is slightly changing. So the change of scenery breaks things up. It like punctuates your day. So commuting punctuates your day. You might see someone on the train, have a conversation, give someone a compliment in the shop or something. Every online event starts and finishes in a pretty similar way, in front of the same screen. So there's no bookmark or punctuation point to that experience. There's less ways that you can sort of tag your memories throughout the day, because if you are working at home, if you are in front of the computer all day, it's the same. So your brain isn't registering, oh right, I remember seeing this, I remember seeing that. And generally speaking, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but for myself, I get my best ideas when I'm driving, when I'm outside, when I'm in the fresh air. So I've had to really work on that over the lockdowns. It's a bit like, if you can imagine playing a piano, or trying to play the game Twister without the colours of the dots. All the dots are white, or all the keys on the piano, they're all white, for example. So you can't see which keys to play when, and that's a really good metaphor for what's going on with our memory. It's like playing a piano when there's none of the black keys and trying to find your way around it. So that's kind of what's going on in your brain. So sometimes, because of the experience of lockdown, as I say, what happens during the day isn't punctuated as well, so it doesn't create more vivid memories, because it might be quite similar. The days can merge into one. You know, you're not walking past an office where you had that really good meeting a couple of weeks ago, and remind you, oh, actually, I need to pick up something from that meeting or email that person. You know, you're not in those different locations. It's all, at the moment, for many of us, sitting at the computer. And again, the Zoom meetings are tiring, you know, and some working from home is much more intense, actually, sometimes than working from the office. And for many people, you know, I was coaching someone the other week, and he said, oh, I'm just so drained and so fed up. I said, okay, what's going on? He said, well, on Friday night, I finished working about 5 o'clock, and then I I said, well, what do you do then? He said, well, I go into the house, but the boys are playing on the computer. They're sitting there just playing, and I'm like, well, what do I do now? I'm bored. So he goes back and does more work. So he's not keeping his routine, and that blurring between his personal life and his work life is causing him a lot of fatigue, a lot of worry, and a lot of concern, and a lot of, you know, he's feeling quite down at the moment. So we worked on setting some boundaries for his day. You know, the lack of, you know, and that lack of routine and a bit of anxiety can also disturb our sleep. So it's no wonder that if you felt tired and overwhelmed and fatigued, there's a lot of stuff going on. As you can see, this is really the tip of the iceberg. I'm just touching on a few things that I've been researching and reading about around this brain fog, about this fatigue that we're experiencing. And to give you an example, I don't know if you've been to London, and London have what they call black cabs. They're taxis, and they are licensed London taxis. And the taxi drivers in London have to do an exam, a test called the knowledge. And the knowledge is all about how to navigate around London. The guys, those taxi drivers, have a bigger part of one part of their brain, the hippocampus, than any other profession. So that processing part of their brain is bigger than it is in many other professions, because they're having to use it and work for it. It's bigger than it is for many other people, and it's because they're using that part of the brain. And you know, as people get older, as people's lives become more confined and repetitive, that part of the brain that is the central processing part of the brain decreases. Do you see what I mean? So there's actual reasons for this stuff happening if you have been feeling a bit out of sorts. You know, so next time, try not using your sat nav. Use your brain, visualize, use different parts and aspects of yourself to navigate your way somewhere. There are things you can do about this. You can go for a walk in unfamiliar places, in an unfamiliar street, try a new route, try a new exercise, try a new, you know, if you have had a routine throughout lockdown, shift it, change it. If you're better in the morning, work earlier in the morning. Better in the evening, maybe you want to work later in the day. Don't sit at your desk all day. Could you do a phone call whilst walking? Could you take a gym class in the middle of the day? Just because you're working at home does not mean you have to be a slave to the computer, because in real life, normal life, inverted commas, you'd be walking around the building, talking to people, having conversations. So break it up a bit. You know, change your routine. Go for a walk and listen to an audio book. Go and sit in the park. Take those breaks. Get away from the computer. You know, and that also, you know, helps you to use different parts of your brain for processing. It stops that fatigue of sitting in front of the computer all day, and it helps you to really sort of create some boundaries for how long you work and your perception of time. You know, maybe there's some, you know, creative activities that you want to do, something, a hobby that you've never tried, I don't know, like pottery making, I don't know. The other things you can do is reflect on each day and maybe keep a diary, because it'd be interesting to look back and see how you were feeling and what you observed during this time. It may well be that you feel like, well, my days are so stressful, I don't remember it, or there's nothing that noteworthy, but just see what you can write down and recall and what you're grateful for, because that again is going to help your brain process things. It's going to help your memory. It's going to help your memory grow. Obviously, use lists and alerts if you need to remember to buy things and you've still got a bit of lockdown brain. And, you know, our brains are elastic, and even though some of the restrictions are being eased, I don't think people are quite there yet in terms of perhaps feeling like they did a long time ago, because there's still such uncertainty around, well, how long are we going to be out of this lockdown, or what's going to be different in due course. I still think there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think just have to accept we may not like bounce back to our old selves as immediately as we thought we would. Now maybe you haven't suffered with any of this, maybe it's been absolutely fine for you, but as I said, we're just dealing with so much change. You know, we've had to create that new normal. We've had to create that new normal, and it's been very tiring. And what happens when we're adapting to these changes all the time, and all of these factors I've just mentioned, it leaves us, you know, as I mentioned, feeling fatigued, feeling forgetful, and finding even the most mindless things a real effort and a real challenge. Even the simplest task needs a heck of a lot of motivation because of all the stuff we've been processing and dealing with over this year. And it can, you know, I've definitely had moments where I've had to really push myself, motivate myself to do things that would usually become second nature. It's easy to let that slide. So try some of the tips that I suggested earlier, and you know, try some of those different exercises to help you motivate yourself and concentrate. Because, like, let's not forget, almost a year ago, we had to make such a big shift to our life. You know, to stuff that was once routine, not being routine anymore. You know, tight schedules, live social events, different commitments of modern life. That just went overnight. So don't forget how much of a big shift and how well you're doing actually to have got this far through it. And we're dealing with something that we've never dealt before, and we're dealing with something that's been invisible. So we've had to really abandon our concept of control. We've had to abandon what we would consider normal habits. We've had to abandon normal routines. And that all creates a bit of a breeding ground for a bit of stress, lack of motivation, fatigue, and a bit of anxiety. And again, I'm not trying to make you like go, oh my God, where's my beer? I know, like, I'm not trying to make you depressed or anything. I'm just trying to help to sort of understand what might be going on. Do you know what I mean? And I'm doing this because, as I say, I saw Paul McKenna on TV, the hypnotist, the self-help guy, and he was saying, quite frankly, if you haven't felt bewildered, upset, demotivated, I was going to swear then, but fed up, think of the other F word, then, oh, thanks for your comments, Emily. Let's just have a look. Let me just see if I can see your rest of your comment. Yeah, definitely. Stretching, actually, Emily, is fantastic. That is, if you stretch and look up, that's a really good way to make yourself feel better. And the other thing that I talk about, and this is a real thing, I'm not making it up, Skyology. Right, bear with me on this one. So being around nature is one of the best things we can do if we want to give ourselves a lift. Nature, exercise, or just being in nature. That's why, like, outdoor swimming, forest bathing. That's a follow-up to Forrest Gump. Sorry, it's a Forrest Gump joke. I just made that up. Being around nature has been demonstrated through studies to be one of the best ways to lift ourselves up. And guess what? Skyology, looking at the sky. Just looking at the sky is one of the most effective ways to make yourself feel better. Try it. Oh! Is that Sally? Emily? Sally Gunnell, you mean the runner? God, I wonder what happened to her. Did she talk about Skyology? Brilliant. So I'm not going mad then. Anyway, so where did I get to? So it's guys, I'm just sharing this because even like Paul McKenna was saying, look, oh okay, thanks Emily. Paul McKenna was saying, look, I've been like this, everybody's been like it, we've all been up and down in our own little spaces and places and feeling different. You know, I've definitely in this last lockdown, hopefully the last, you know, I've struggled with motivation at times. It's like, oh God, you know, and it is our brain working with change, all the change we've had to deal with, all the repetitiveness of the day, the lack of social interactions. We're not creating those memories that we used to have. Our memories are quite similar because we've been working at home a lot. We've not been out a lot. So, you know, that brain fog is coming into it. But to go through the video again, because I go into this in much more details. And we're dealing with stuff that we've never had to deal with before. So all of this stuff is very tiring on the brain. And if there is a bit of worry, a bit of stress and anxiety, it is going to fatigue us and it will eat into motivation. So just be aware of that and don't kind of go too hard on yourself if you feel like you're not as productive as you really been before. Let's have a look. I'm going to have to look this stuff up actually, Emily. Sally struggled with motivation and her husband is now, yeah, that's a really good story, Emily, actually, if you think about it with the Olympics. You know, if you've had, and I've found this with some of my own goals, but I'm not entering the weightlifting this year. I'm not in the Olympics, clearly. Anyway, if you think about that visualization of that goal and leading up to it, you know, a lot around sports psychology and visualization and mindset, and then that changes and then you don't know when it's happening. That is really interesting. I'm going to look that up. Thanks, Emily. I might see a post on that soon, because I never thought about it in the context of athletes. I've just thought about it in a personal context in terms of, God, why have I sometimes found it so hard just to like get up and do stuff. Luckily, the one constant has been exercise, because my gym has been brilliant. They've done all their exercise outside, one-to-one in parks during the more stricter lockdown that we had. Exactly, small walk for dog. You will feel better. Yeah, well, this is why, Emily, the purchase of dogs has skyrocketed through lockdown. They've gone up in price. There's an increase in dog napping, and more people are buying dogs now for that. I think for that companionship, that unrequited, what's the word? Unconditional love, and you know, the exercise, and you know, I don't know, I'm thinking of getting a dog actually, but I keep putting it off. But I'm thinking of getting a little dachshund. Sorry, that's a bit of a diversion. But anyway, this fatigue that you're feeling and lack of motivation, as Emily quite rightly says there, I mean, blimey, if Olympic athletes are feeling it, then let's face it, we've got Olympic athletes, we've got one of the world's biggest self-help gurus, Paul McKenna, talking about it. So it is a real thing. So please don't beat yourself up. But we're managing the invisibility of this virus, the lack of control, the constantly changing regulations, the abandonment of our normal habits, the lack of, I've missed a spontaneity of like, right, I'm just going to get in the car and go somewhere, but I probably will do that at some point. And it's just a perfect breeding ground for this stress and anxiety we've probably all been suffering, as well as what might be going on at work. For example, if your business has been through furloughing staff, you might be carrying the work of 2 people. I've certainly spoken and coached people that have been in companies where furlough has taken place, and it's like, oh my God, it's absolutely exhausting. Thanks for that, Emily. I'm going to have a look at it. Thank you. So yeah, where are we? Yeah, so what can we do? So how can we emerge a little bit from brain fog? Okay, how can we feel a little bit more like ourselves? Now at the beginning of the video, I gave you loads of different tips. So I've mentioned Skyology, endorsed by Sally Gunnell, OBE, whatever. I don't know, what was it? Anyway, so Skyology, being around nature, meditation, journaling, write down how you're feeling now, reflect, write down what you're grateful for, write down your key strengths, and keep looking back at this diary. Look back, because it'd be interesting, to look back and see how you were feeling. Routine, good to have a routine, mix it up a bit. Break, punctuate different parts of your day, break up the day. Oh, that's lovely, Emily. It's absolutely fine. No, I love it. I love it when I get this interaction and I get stuff back from people, and I'm really happy for people to share. So it's not disruptive at all. I really, really welcome it, because it's going to give me food for thought for something else, and I'll probably share something on that as well. It's really fantastic. Thanks, Emily. So yeah, exercise, we talked about pets, yeah, absolutely, playing with children, being around people of different ages, if you're allowed to be around people. What else did I say? Obviously we talked about sleep, exercise, talked about trying something new. I'll go into that in a minute. But if you've got a routine, change the routine perhaps. Sleep, eating, health, vitamins, plenty of vitamin D, plenty of water. If you are allowed out, make an effort. Don't get into a slump. Make an effort to see friends. Get back on that dating app. You want to. But anyway, so what can we do around this cognitive overload that we've got from COVID? Don't judge yourself too harshly. As well as everything I've said, do not judge yourself too harshly, because this is the way you're if you're feeling a bit scatterbrained, it's not that there's a huge defect in your character. It's not that you've got some sort of terrible mental illness, unless you have got a condition that's been diagnosed. It's a natural response to dealing with a stressful time and a difficult situation. Okay, short-term goals. Set some short-term goals. Maybe have a look at the next month. Maybe then break it down week by week, day by day, however you want to do it. But shit, that could have nearly been a swear word. Set some goals, because human beings are much happier when we've got a purpose and we've got goals to work to. Now, just talking about purpose, that could be religious, it could be spiritual, it could be caring for your cocker spaniel, your children, your family, your extended family, social contribution. It could be playing the drums. I don't know, you might have some kind of purpose or something, you know, and playing the drums maybe that your purpose is to live the most creative, expressive life in the world. Family could be about being the best member of the family. That is your goal in life, your purpose. So set achievable goals. Okay, prioritize well-being, all of those things that I've just talked about. Get yourself, I mean, I've been terrible at this, watching too many box sets. I went through a phase where I was a bit wobbly. I did have something personally that was going on for me that kind of upset me a bit, and I did go through like a week and a half where it's just like, you know, I'm watching too many box sets and I'm going to bed too late, and that definitely had an impact on my memory, definitely had an impact on my productivity. So it's not that you're lazy, you know, unless you are lazy. It's not that you're lazy, it's just that lockdown is having this like overload of processing going on in our brains. So make sure you are prioritising your well-being with all those things that we've talked about. Create boundaries of, you know, what you do at work, what you do at home, especially if you're working from home. Don't do what my client was doing, wear a shirt and then jogging bottoms at the bottom, unless that makes you feel really productive. But he was switching off at 5, coming into the home from his garden office, looking around, feeling bored, went back to work. So that's not going to help anyone, because he was just absolutely burning out. So create those boundaries, find something to do, go for a walk, buy a dog, go and help at a dog shelter or something. Sorry, Emily, we're going more into dogs here. Let's have a look. See, being grateful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh no. Definitely, Emily. I'm sorry to hear that. That's I actually had a friend. I had an experience of that with a friend as well, actually, over the lockdown, and it certainly. I did it in one of my earlier videos that sort of put things in perspective and think about the fact that there's billions of people on this earth, and think about what's going on in some of the other countries and how lucky we are. In positive psychology, the ability to count your blessings, what you're grateful for, that's been proven to have a massively impactful, beneficial effect on our mental health. And I'm sure if you could say, you know, as you say, your best friend is saying, giving you a very clear message there, but also if you imagine yourself being like 90 years old, you know, and what would you tell yourself now, you know, if you had, you know, and there are other things you can do, like what would you put on your gravestone? You know, I know that might sound a bit depressing, but there is the saying, I don't know whether you've heard of it, very often on people's gravestones you don't read, I wish I worked harder, you know. That's not, you don't see that. We don't all bloody, excuse my French, wish we worked harder. My dad was actually, when I was very young, sorry I'm going off on one a bit here, but anyway, because Emily's brought it up, when I was, well, young, from quite a young age, probably to my teens, my dad was really poorly, had cancer, and it was bowel cancer actually, at a time when didn't know a lot about it, and it's one that they'd sort of caught it just in the nick of time, and he had to have a lot of operations, and he's still alive now. My dad's like Robocop, he's like, nothing seems to knock him down, so to speak. But I remember being like really young and just coming in really and thinking about, I wonder if my dad's going to be alive or not. And I was chatting to a relative, and she said, I used to hear dad crying at night about what was happening. That created a lot of tension in the house, a lot of financial pressure. I was torn, you know, because I just wanted to look after everyone. I wanted my mum to be okay, I wanted my dad to be okay. Was looking after him a lot, trying to help with all of that. And that taught me a lot of lessons early on about being grateful. Now, we all have moments, but yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry to hear about your friend Emily, and I completely echo. I had my first mammogram I think it was just last year actually. So definitely, ladies and gentlemen, get all the health checks that you need to. Don't let that put your foot down and get those checks. We're still entitled to them over here. Exactly, it's completely right. It's been well written about. Nobody, and that's why I sort of do a lot with people's careers, because it's like, what is the point? You know, if it was your last day on earth tomorrow, what would you do? I mean, yeah, I'd be an actress or an astronaut, but I really haven't got the drive to re-qualify in that way. But I'm quite happy to, you know, I love coaching, so it's absolutely fine, and it makes sense for me as a person and what I'm doing. But I do love it. I do love coaching, and what I do, some of the other work I do, some of the in-house work I do. But yeah, absolutely recount your blessings and just think about, you know, what's going on in other parts of the world. I think is really important. Box sets, Line of Duty, Say No More, Mother of God. I love Hastings. Sorry, I'm really going off on one now. So just acknowledge how you're feeling. It's fine. Just say, do you know what? At the moment, I'm feeling a bit fed up. Just now, just for this moment, and then try and move on. Let's not try and push those feelings down. You know, take a deep breath, ride through the feelings, because what we call negative feelings actually have got a lot of information about us. And maybe with this stripped back life that we're living in many cases, maybe there's stuff going on for you that's like, do you know what? I've never really acknowledged that I'm not happy in my job. I've never really acknowledged that perhaps this isn't quite the relationship for me. I've never really acknowledged that perhaps I want to adopt a child. I've never acknowledged really that, do you know what, I want to travel, because I'm noticing myself shifting. One of my key life values is has always been challenge and adventure and exploration, and I've always put that in the same bucket. I used to do all my school yeah, definitely, I love Belfast, it's a beautiful city. I did loads of really crazy scuba diving, deep scuba diving. Kevin, if he's still on here, has been on a few trips with me. So it was just crazy stuff, right laugh. And then I got to a point where I thought, I'm not enjoying this anymore. So that shifted from a challenge adventure into exploration in a different way, exploration of how the mind works, which got me more into the coaching over the years and other areas, learning, doing positive psychology, that kind of stuff. But now, since lockdown, I'm like, oh, I need a challenge. I've gone back. So my values have shifted. So check in with what's important to you. If you want any help on values, just drop me a message. It's something I do a lot on, because values are about what's important to us in life. And I know that now I'm like, I need a challenge. I need a challenge. I need something that is perhaps a bit more physical. Do you know what I mean? I need to literally stretch my brain, as we all do. So acknowledge it's challenging, acknowledge some shifts, keep writing down in your journal, because that gets it out of our head onto paper. That helps us process what's going on for us, create those boundaries around work, have downtime, do things like crosswords, puzzles, something creative to keep your mind going that isn't gonna like overly put any pressure on you, but it's still going to keep your mind alert, and look to the future. Believe it or not, we can still look to the future and see what it is you might want to do. You know, okay, what is it that I'm learning during this lockdown? What's different? What's changed? What's evolved for me and come to the forefront? Anyway, so that's my video today, a bit on brain fog, a bit on lockdown, and a bit about what you can do about it. So thank you everyone for being on here. Thanks for your comment. Thanks, Emily. Lovely to see you. Definitely catch up offline. It'd be great to hear your news. And have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And if you are able to get out, I really hope you get some lovely fresh air. And if you're still in lockdown, you know, and things aren't going so well for you where you are, just sending you lots of love and hugs, and thinking of you and your families. Take care. Bye.